My name is Blake. I'm 35 years old, a sergeant in the United States Army, and I've seen some pretty dark things overseas. But nothing ever prepared me for what I found in my parents' home last fall. I hadn't heard from them in over a week. No texts, no calls, not even the usual Sunday voicemail from my mom. That wasn't like them. At first, I thought maybe they just needed space again. We'd argued the last time we talked, so I figured they were giving me the silent treatment. But when the 8th day passed and not even a single update, I felt something twist in my gut. I was on leave after a long stretch of training, so I decided to drive out to their place. It's a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing bad is supposed to happen. When I pulled up, everything looked normal: car in the driveway, lawn trimmed, lights off, curtains drawn. But the air felt wrong, not just quiet, hollow. I knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. I tried calling both their phones. Straight to voicemail. I walked around to the back and let myself in with the spare key they'd always kept hidden under the loose stone by the steps. The smell hit me first. Not rot or anything like that. Just stale. Like no one had opened a window in days. Inside, everything was spotless. Spotless in a way that didn't feel right. My mom wasn't exactly messy, but this was surgical. The floor sparkled. Couch pillows lined up perfectly. Even the coasters were stacked. I don't know why, but that's when my chest tightened. Something wasn't just off. Something was very wrong. I moved slowly, checking every room, calling out their names like maybe they'd pop out and surprise me. Nothing. Just that strange quiet. Until I walked past the hall closet, that's when I heard it. Barely a sound, but definitely there. A breath, soft, shaky, like someone trying not to cry. I froze. My fingers hovered near the doorknob. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I counted to 3 in my head. Then I opened the door. What I saw inside changed everything. We grew up in a house where silence meant order. My dad was a Marine before he became a father. He believed in rules, respect, and structure, and he made sure we followed all 3. Or at least, I did. I learned to keep my shoes lined up under the bed, to sit straight at the dinner table, to speak only when spoken to. I wasn't scared of my dad. I just didn't want to disappoint him. That mattered to me. Kyle never cared about any of that. He was younger by 2 years, and from the moment he could talk, he pushed every boundary. If I was the soldier in training, he was the rebel on a tricycle. He talked back, broke things, skipped curfew, and always had some excuse waiting. Somehow, every time, Mom forgave him before the punishment could land. Dad would get mad, sure, but it never stuck. Kyle would flash that grin, say something clever, and it was like nothing ever happened. I watched it over and over. I did everything right. He broke every rule, but he got the laughs, the hugs, the second chances. It started small, the resentment. I wouldn't have even called it that back then. It was more like a knot in my stomach I couldn't explain. A tightness that showed up when Kyle got away with something again, or when Mom told me I should be more understanding. I wanted to scream sometimes. Understanding? Of what? That being loud and reckless got you love, and following the rules just made you invisible? As we got older, the gap between us grew. Kyle got into fights at school. I studied in silence. He snuck out late. I made sure the doors were locked. By the time I was 16, I was already thinking about joining the army, not because I was passionate about service, but because I needed a way out. I needed a place where rules meant something, where effort was rewarded, not ignored. I didn't hate Kyle. I envied how easily he moved through the world, how little he seemed to care. But more than anything, I was angry at the way our parents let him drift while holding me in place. There were moments I thought maybe they'd see it. One Christmas, Dad told me he was proud I got straight A's that semester. It was a rare moment, and it stuck with me. But then Kyle showed up late, high out of his mind, and Mom wrapped her arms around him like he'd just come back from war. I remember standing there with my unopened gift in my lap, wondering what I had to do to earn that kind of embrace. I never found the answer. People say families are complicated. I think ours was simple. There was Kyle, and then there was me. He got the love, I got the lecture. And somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to change it. I just kept my head down, stayed out of trouble, and counted the days until I could leave. I didn't plan on never looking back. But once you've been invisible long enough, you start to wonder if anyone notices when you're gone. I signed my enlistment papers 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. Not because I had some deep love for the flag or a family legacy to honor. I joined the army because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. The tension had thickened to the point where every conversation felt like a trap. I was either too quiet or too cold, too distant or too judgmental. And Kyle was setting fires while I got blamed for the smoke. By then, he'd already been arrested twice. The first time for shoplifting, the second for punching a cop who told him to get off the sidewalk. My parents bailed him out both times. No questions, no conditions. Just hugs and warm meals waiting at home like nothing had happened. I remember watching him come through the front door that second time, covered in bruises and blood, and my mom crying like he was the victim. I stood in the kitchen with a glass in my hand and felt like I was watching a movie I no longer belonged in. He started using hard drugs not long after that. Pills at first, then heroin. Stole from our neighbors, crashed Dad's truck and blamed a friend. Every time he got caught, there was another excuse. He was just going through something. He needed help, not punishment. They treated his destruction like a phase, while my distance was some cold betrayal. So I left, packed my duffel, shook my dad's hand, kissed my mom on the cheek, and walked out without saying goodbye to Kyle. Boot camp was hard, but it was honest. For the first time in my life, I knew where I stood. There were rules, and if you followed them, you earned respect. I never looked back, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep hoping they'd finally see me. They had made their choice. They chose Kyle, even as he burned everything down. I just didn't want to be part of the wreckage anymore. The last time I spoke to my parents was on a Sunday afternoon, 6 months before everything happened. I called out of some sense of duty. It had been a while, and I thought maybe things had changed. Maybe they'd ask how I was doing. Maybe they'd miss me. What I got instead was an update on Kyle. He was clean now. He was working at a tire shop. He had a new girlfriend. My mom's voice lit up in a way I hadn't heard in years. I waited for a pause, some space in the conversation where they might ask about me, how I was sleeping, what I was working toward, if I was still stationed in the same base. But that moment never came. They spoke like I was a distant relative, someone they were obligated to speak to but had no real questions for. When I said I had to go, they didn't protest. They just told me to call again soon. I never did. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even sadness. It was something colder, like realizing a door had been closed for years and I'd only just noticed. I wasn't part of their picture anymore. Maybe I never was. And the truth of that didn't sting like a fresh wound. It settled like dust in an empty room. Quiet, final. I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped hoping they'd see me. The second I stepped back into the house, something felt off. The silence wasn't normal. It wasn't peaceful or still. It was heavy, pressed against my skin like humidity that wouldn't lift. There was no music, no clatter from the kitchen, not even the buzz of a TV humming in the background. Just air that didn't move. I called out. No answer. The place looked untouched, but not in a lived-in way. The kind of clean that doesn't feel right. The kind that's too perfect. Shoes lined up in pairs by the door. Magazines stacked evenly on the coffee table. Couch cushions puffed and neat like they'd just come out of the package. My mom always kept a tidy home, but this wasn't her style. This was clinical. I stepped farther in and caught a smell. Not strong, not foul. But it didn't belong, like damp cardboard and something sour just starting to turn. I paused, trying to place it. My boots echoed softly on the floorboards. Still no sign of anyone. I moved down the hall toward the bedrooms. My hand brushed the wall, grounding myself. That's when I heard it. The faintest sound. A breath. Quick, unsteady, coming from the guest room closet. My pulse spiked. I didn't speak. Didn't want to scare whatever was on the other side. I approached slowly. Every instinct in my body was bracing for something bad. My fingers closed around the knob. I took a breath, then opened the door. She was curled in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest. A worn teddy bear clutched so tight the fabric was ripping at the seams. Blonde hair tangled around her cheeks, eyes wide and glassy. My niece, Ellie, just 4 years old. She looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. Then her lips moved. "Uncle Blake, don't let him find me." My throat closed. I dropped to my knees, reaching for her gently, but she flinched. I whispered her name, told her she was safe now, that I was here, but her little body kept trembling. She didn't blink, didn't cry, just kept holding on to that bear like it was the only thing keeping her from vanishing. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't know where my brother was. I didn't know what he'd done, but I knew something was broken, something beyond repair. And this little girl had been hiding in a closet, waiting for someone to come save her. The officers arrived less than 20 minutes after I called. I met them on the porch with Ellie in my arms, still trembling but silent. I handed her off to the paramedics and watched the front door open wide behind them. That's when the house stopped feeling like a home. It turned into a crime scene. They moved carefully, like stepping through a museum of grief. Gloves on, radios low. The place looked so perfect it made them nervous. One of them told me the spotless living room was what tipped him off. No dust, no clutter. It was like someone had tried too hard to make it look untouched. He asked if I'd been in the basement. I hadn't. I didn't want to, but they did. They found my parents side by side, behind the water heater. Blankets thrown over them like an afterthought. No signs of a struggle upstairs, no forced entry. Just two bodies and a silence that stretched the length of the house. I remember one cop muttering that whoever did this had planned it. Then he went quiet when he saw my face. The search continued for hours. I stayed in the driveway, knees shaking, heart hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Just stared at the window of the guest room where Ellie had hidden. Around sunset, one of the detectives walked over holding a folder in an evidence bag. It had been found in the back seat of a car parked down the block, registered to Kyle. Inside was a single document, a property transfer form, with forged signatures from my parents. The name on the receiving line was Kyle's. That was the moment it all fit. The strange silence. The perfect living room. Ellie's words in the closet. He had come for more than another favor. He came to take everything. And when they refused, he took them too. They caught him 2 days later in a motel outside of town. No resistance, no chase. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, smoking a cigarette like he'd been waiting. At the station, I watched through the glass as they questioned him. I don't know what I expected. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. What I saw was something else entirely. He spoke like it was routine. He told them he'd asked for help again, that our parents said no, that they were done cleaning up his messes. He said he didn't mean to hurt them, not really. But things got loud, and he panicked. He forced them to sign the document, and when they refused at first, he lost control. He talked about it like he was describing someone else's mistake, like it was an unfortunate thing that just happened. He said Ellie wouldn't stop crying. So he put her in the closet, gave her a bear, told her to stay quiet. That part made my hands shake. Not just because of what he did, but how easily he said it. No emotion, no shame. Like he'd stepped over a crack in the sidewalk, not buried our parents under a blanket. I stood there, fists clenched, jaw locked. I wanted to scream, wanted to shatter the glass and ask him what the hell happened to the boy I once knew. But deep down, I already knew the answer. That boy was never real. Or maybe he was, but he died long before our parents did. And what was left sitting in that room was a man who didn't feel sorry. Just tired. Just empty. I didn't plan to become a parent. Especially not like this. But when they asked me what to do with Ellie, there wasn't a second of hesitation. I said she's coming with me. She didn't need foster homes or strangers. She needed someone who knew her name, who remembered the way her mom used to braid her hair. Someone who'd fight like hell to give her peace. I put in the paperwork to leave the army. They processed it fast. I think they saw it in my eyes, whatever fight I had left, it wasn't meant for combat anymore. I came back to town and used what little I had saved to reopen Dad's old auto shop. It was dusty, full of rusted tools and memories I wasn't sure I wanted, but it gave me a purpose. And Ellie needed stability. Something simple, something ours. We moved into a small place nearby, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a backyard with overgrown grass. She'd sit on the porch while I changed oil and rebuilt engines. At first, she barely spoke, just held that same teddy bear everywhere she went. But then, little by little, she started humming again, laughing when I burned dinner, falling asleep in my lap during late-night cartoons, healing in pieces. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the back room of the shop, the one Dad always kept locked. Tucked behind an old filing cabinet, I found a small tin box. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, folded, stained with oil and time. It was addressed to me. He said he was sorry, that he knew he'd failed me in ways he never meant to, that he'd let Kyle break too many things without fixing what mattered. He didn't excuse it, didn't try to explain, just said he saw the man I'd become, and he hoped I'd forgive him someday. At the bottom, in smaller writing, were 7 words that still echo in my chest. I should have told you I was proud. It wasn't a will, not a legal document, just a father's last attempt to say what he couldn't when he was alive. And somehow, that was enough. Not to erase the pain, but to soften it, to make space for something new. I'm not a hero. I'm just a soldier who came home and found something worth staying for. I wake up every day and make pancakes badly. I walk Ellie to preschool. I fix brakes and change tires and try to be better than the silence I was raised in. Some nights, when she's asleep, I sit on the porch and look up at the stars. I think about the family I lost, the brother I couldn't save, the parents who got it wrong, but maybe tried in their own way. And then I look inside the window and see Ellie curled up on the couch with a blanket and that worn-out bear. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I don't talk about Kyle anymore, not because I've forgotten, but because Ellie deserves a future that isn't tied to his shadow. She's growing fast now, braver, louder. Her laugh fills rooms the way silence used to. Some days, she even sings in the bath, like she's learning to trust joy again. On her 5th birthday, we had cupcakes and balloons in the backyard. Just a few neighbors, some kids from her preschool, and a crooked banner she helped me tape up. I was grilling hot dogs when she ran up behind me, grabbed my leg, and said it so softly I almost missed it. Daddy. Just that one word. Like it had always been mine. I froze, spatula in hand, and she just smiled like it was no big deal. Like I hadn't waited my whole life to hear it. I turned away because I didn't want her to see me cry, but she knew, she always knows. That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, she curled up next to me on the couch. She fell asleep with her head on my chest, still smelling like cake and sunshine. And I realized something. I didn't just lose a family, I got to build one. Not perfect, not planned, but real. And somehow, in all the wreckage, that little girl found me. Saved me, really. And I think I saved her too.